Hello, check. Check. Well, hello. Thank you so much for being here today. It's so wonderful to see really a lot of community members mixed with a lot of students. So that's really, really powerful and really awesome. My name is Sophia. I am taught by these amazing people up here. I'm a senior this year in the Applied Social Science major. I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for our student government, and I am joined by my best friend and roommate and partner in crime and everything, Chris. And she can introduce herself.
Partner in crime, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Chris. I'm the Vice President of SSA. I'm also taught by some of these amazing people up here. And yes, I wouldn't say partner in crime, but this is my best friend, Sophia, and we will be moderating for today. So I have some introductions before we get started. Lopa Basu is a professor of English at UW-Stout. She teaches composition, post-9/11 American literature, and graphic narratives.
Hello. Oh, here we go. And then right next to, we have the wonderful Courtney Julich. She is an assistant professor of political science. She teaches me a lot of things. And her research mostly focuses on electoral laws and equity.
And then finally, but not least, Chris Freeman is a history teacher, passionate advocate of peace and nonviolence, and will read his script tonight so he doesn't get into any trouble. So, will one of you like to start? How do we want to do this? Down the line?
This is just so much fun. Can you even believe it? This is just so much fun. Can you even believe it? I mean, just think about the context for this for a second. Our liberal institutions of Republican values have completely failed us. They've failed our country and they've failed our students. But ours hasn't. They gave us this theater and they gave us a place where we can talk about what's happening, where we can bear witness to the historical present. And we'll take a number of different ways in which we can think about how we can contextualize the place that we find ourselves in this historical present. That is like, I see a lot of opportunity here. I know that I see a lot of fear in my students' faces. And I also see a lot of anger. And I see a lot of that on the posts of a lot of my friends. And I just want to let you know that anger and fear are the conditions that produce tyranny. So if you're reproducing fear and you're reproducing anger, you're creating exactly the environment that you're trying to prevent. So please reconsider. How we are in the public sphere is how we are when we perform our values. And so what I wanted to talk about tonight, of course, you know, I love the theater, and where are we right now? We're in a theater. And thinking about the theatrical and the dramatic and how that was the essential way in which the early Athenians, who could teach us a lot about the nature of democracy and performing our values, it's a place in which the citizenry came together. There were 150 deans throughout Attica, the place that the Athenians called home. And if each of those places didn't have a theater, they had access to a theater, and that's where they gathered. So they gathered with their neighbors, that's where they gathered with their citizens, that's where they gathered to tell their stories. Of course, they saw dramas performed there, but that's where they came together, and I think this is important, without fear and without anger. And that's where they fought tyranny, 24/7. It was a full-time job, because you live in a democracy. And I don't think we're prepared for that job. And I think that we could think about, you know, how the Athenians did it, as they trained for it. I don't think we've been training ourselves in terms of how we fight tyranny. And the great training ground for the great school of Hellas, the school of the Greeks, is in the theater. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. I wrote a 3-act play, and I know I'm supposed to stick to my script, so I'll get back to it pretty quickly. But I kind of screwed up because I was trying to write a 3-act play, but then I wrote a 4-act play, and I'm like, oh my god, there's no 4-act Greek dramas. Like, what the hell did I do now? So then I changed the first act into a proeme, and it's really an establishing shot that I'm going to give to you. I had the great fortune with Dr. Ulick to bring 21 Stout students to crawl around the ancient Greek monuments to investigate what it was about the Greeks that made them so Greek. We climbed on the Acropolis. We poked around in the Pnyx, where they gathered to perform their democracy. We were in the Agora, peering into the heart of what made this kind of Tohelenikon, this Greek thing, pulse with life. But then the most important place we went is the place that I got lost from the students because I wasn't paying attention and they went one way and went the other. I was like, where did my students go? I wonder where they are. Well, you know where they were. They were at the Theater of Dionysus in the south side of the Acropolis. And we don't know how important that was to the Athenian democracy. 15,000 people could fit there. And that's where they came under the clear light of day, under the god of light. Lycos Genes, light-born Apollo. So they could talk about true things. They could test their values and flex them. And the theater that really, made them have to consider deeply about what it was about those values that could help them overcome conflict. You know what they didn't use there? They didn't use any data. They didn't use critical analysis. They didn't use critical theory. They didn't even use any facts. But they defended against tyranny like hell. I think we can learn about how you defend against tyranny by thinking about how you perform your values, what you lean on. And for the Greeks, they thought about what motivated them. It wasn't what was on the outside. It was what was on the inside. And that's what made them fight like hell to protect, their freedoms in a way in which that I think maybe contemporary Americans could, reflect on a little bit. Not that we're doing it wrong, but there's other ways of doing things. So in my establishing shot, I tried to position the fact that we were climbing around these monuments to the values, the things that motivated Greeks and their democracy, especially the Athenians, and how they positioned themselves in relationship to the fighting of tyranny and tyrannos. And I got to thinking about the things I could describe to you guys to set the stage for how and why this is such a powerful part of the democratic experience. And I think if I could take you guys anywhere right now, if I could go anywhere in Greece, I would take you guys to Heraklion. And we go in front of the grave of Nikos Kazantzakis. And this is what I want you to know is the Greeks have been fighting tyranny like hell for 2,500 years, from Pericles to Kazantzakis. I would take you to his grave, and on that grave, the gravestone of gravestones, is a testament to the Greek values that helps you understand the connection between values and fighting tyranny. The gravestone says, then alpis odipiter, then phobia medipiter, ima eleftheros. I hope for nothing, I fear for nothing, I am free. And that's where I would go. Because it gets to some of the motivating ideas that make people want to act, and that's what the drama is all about. It comes from the verb dreo, which means to act. It doesn't mean to post. It means to act. And it's not fair the way we train our kids about democracy. We give them unrealistic expectations, that they can do it from the comfort of their own home in a safe space. The safe space is being in a space where you can operate without fear, without anger, where you can explore, you can stretch your values to really ask questions about yourself and who we are, where we're going. But most importantly, how we can defend against tyrannos. I'm telling you, it's a full-time job. The Greeks did a really good job of it, the Athenians especially. Just think about it. We can't impeach people that have been impeached for committing crimes. We're totally incapable of acting to protect democracy and against the threat of tyrannos. Think about the Athenians. Who they impeached? They impeached their heroes because they were a threat. Their power was a threat. They impeached Miltiades, Themistocles, Pericles, Alcibiades. We can't even impeach criminals. And we get a very different understanding of what to act means and how we take action without fear, without anger. We execute things because we act on our values. So that's my rather long establishment shot. Here's Act 1. When we think about the Greeks and how they've, provided against tyranny, it's because they were able to kind of act with balance. Balance in all things, right? Sophrosyne, a healthy mind. That's how you execute a judgment that prevents against the rise of tyranny and those things that threaten us. And the place that they did it, of course, was in theater, where they could see their values being performed, stretched, stressed, put under tension. And the type of tension and the ways in which these things operate. I think it's interesting to us because by some miracle, we can go back and we can learn the way the Athenians learned. We can read their dramas, like right now. We can teach our kids. We can have them watch a play and then debate. What's the tension at hand? How do they use their values? We're worried about legality. The Athenians didn't care about legality. That was for lawyers. Citizens cared about their values and virtues. And when their values and virtues are put under threat from power, that had become unbalanced, they knew that they had to bring that life into balance. So the point of the drama is to create balance and resolution for the tension that's all around you 100% of the time, 24/7, because we live in a democracy, thank God. But that means we have to train ourselves in how we resolve those tensions without creating more fear, without creating more anger, which is going to push the table to the thing we least want to emerge. And that's tyrannos. And I think when you think about those dramatic, how many plays we've lost. But they all perform the same thing. How you bring balance out of tension. How you use values to fight against power. 1,000 different plays in 1,000 different ways. That's where 15,000 Athenians came together to pour out their values like water, to drink it like wine. Because that's how they get people to act. You bring those things on the inside, so you know how to act on the outside. Thinking about the theaters, we played in these theaters, and it was so much fun. I wish you could have been there with us. Not just the theater at Dionysus, but I love the theater of Apollo at Delphi the best. It's magical. It reminds me of South Dakota. The hills just shimmer with minerality. It's like, of course that's where Apollo would have his home. The light shimmers like gold. But outside of the theater at Delphi, it's really important because it gets at this value. Pan, metron, ariston. All things in balance. Always and forever. If you're acting out of fear and you're acting out of hatred, you're tyrannous. And you're bringing up the conditions that are going to create that resolution to your problem. So the Greeks are very serious about the school of drama and the way in which they perform their values in ways in which they was always calling upon people to resolve the tension. At the end of the play, they would all debate what happened. What was that group? What was more important, the law or the value? What was more important, the politics of the household? What was more important, the punishment, or the crime? So thinking about these things, I think it's really important to, think about how the drama can teach us about lessening the kind of conditions that are going to bring about the result we definitely do not effing want. And we definitely do want to slip further into tyranny by creating more fear and more anxiety. Act 2. Democracy holds inclusion as its primary value. I just can't get this across enough. They tested their democracy by thinking about how they could include the other. They weren't perfect, far from it. You could pick on the Athenians for any number of things. Slavery, patriarchy, imperfect democracy, fine. The Athenians are like, bring it. Because they tested their values in a way that resisted tyranny in ways that continue to motivate us. But more importantly, by bringing in those people who are least among us. That was the true test of your democracy. They didn't always do it. But when they did do it, they were, we the people bring in X, Y, and Z. And they did it out of compassion. And they did it without fear. Because they realized that testing the democracy was by testing its relationship to the weak, to the people who are needy, the people who were apolis, without a city-state, people who were fuga, the people who were fugitives. And say what you want about Athens, that was the city of refuge, for the world. That was your hope. And they didn't always grant it, they didn't always give it. But that was a true test of how you think about how democracy operates. That was the most stressful value that they could possibly have. It still is. But like we got Arianes Antetokounmpo, and he gave the most beautiful goodbye, farewell to the Greeks. And he says, we are all Greeks. We all have a home here. Because he got something that talks about the continuity of what the democratic experiment was all about. It's about giving home to those people who are apolis, without a state, and those people who are fuga, who are fleeing. And I don't care if you want to talk about Aeschylus and the Danaids, or you want to talk about Euripides and the Heracleids, or you want to talk about the play of Medea, testified by 2 foreign slaves about the importance of justice and mercy. But it was the least among them that tested their values, because they were the witness to the truth of what any politician could imagine to be the case with their state of their politics. It took the people from outside the polis to make you realize what you actually have. This is the first time in human history we have a policy of universal humanitarian value. You're human beings. They weren't just Athenians and Corinthians. And that's the first time that emerged. And it happens in the theater, where they put to test the values of a democracy. Act 3, and I get a witness. This one's really important, and we don't tend to remember this, but the most important function of a citizen is to be a witness. Socrates was witness. The Greek word for, anybody know the Greek word for witness? Got any Christians in the room? Martus, martyr. It's a witness. It's the most powerful position to be in. And when it's a witness, it doesn't mean a bystander. It means you see with your eyes, you think with your head, and you act with your heart. It means the whole part of you. That's a witness. Socrates is witness to the declining values of the Athenian democracy in the face of the rise of tyranny and the aftermath of the Peloponnesian Wars. He was a martyr. He was put to death. But God bless him for it. This idea of martyr doesn't mean you have to pay with your life, but it means that there are some things that your life is worth laying down for. And I don't believe we teach this in our schools the way that maybe it was taught in the School of Athens. Because we don't see these values being performed in dramas that ask questions very deeply about who they are, what stuff it is that you're made of, what makes you tick, what makes you move, right? What makes you act, draw, root, drama, democracy. You really can't have one without the other. So when we think about these different things that are essential and important for preventing against the rise of tyranny, some of these things are the most simple, and it doesn't take anybody who's really anybody. It just takes us. Bear witness, to what's happening with power and the threat to our values. It's the least among us. You and me. You're an average person? Perfect. You're exactly who democracy needs right now. A regular person. The more witnesses, the better. The more regular people that aren't academics, that aren't politicians, that aren't corporate executives, just regular people. Like I know you guys know this, but I do a lot of teaching in King and nonviolence. And the civil rights was made by regular people doing extraordinary things because they bore witness to tyranny. And the more witnesses, the better. The more average people that take space under the clear light of day, under the God, testifying to the truth, alleviate true things about what's happening here, what's happening now, and how this is threatening our values, so much the better. So we're all made for this. Simple words, you don't need any data, you don't need any critical theory, you don't need anything except to bear witness to what's happening right now. And like, it's not just the way they did it in ancient Athens, but like, how those people bore witness to the gospel. Early Christianity, regular people. The more witnesses, the better. You know, we only have cover when we've got each other. And I think that's what we need right now. And it also testifies to something that's probably something that we've needed for a long time. So thank God we have the opportunity to realize that we've been screwing up. You know, we can do it better. And I'm just really thankful to have the time to share some of my thoughts about why I love history, why I think it can help us out, and why we can lean on our values to maybe, you know, act, to do, and to make sure we feel good about ourselves, you know, together as regular people, just doing the right thing.
So when Chris first texted me about some of his anxiety that he was feeling about what was going on in the world, he asked me to provide some data, which he was just crying over here. And so usually I hide behind my data and I hide behind my PowerPoints, and this has been a very anxious-making experience for me because my desire to talk about this as well comes from a place of wanting to find comfort as well, and mine comes a bit closer and more local than Greece, and it's going to be driven, I guess, quite literally by my father in a black cherry Dodge Caravan. Where we were road tripped to every state in the continental US to go see the national parks, to go see the presidential homes and libraries, and to go see the historical battlegrounds. And for a family that lived in Minneapolis and split our time within Green Bay, we have never been to the Wisconsin Dells. That was not how we were going to do vacations. We were going to be a 4-year-old learning about the Bill of Rights, okay? So thank goodness my father never became an educator because there's some material that's better for certain ages. And so, but it must have worked. I guess they wanted me to be a medical doctor, so maybe not. But you go on these trips and you start to wonder what it means to be an American, right? As a kid, you don't understand what a social security number is or what a passport is. Road tripping. You were not flying anywhere. And so you start to realize as you hear park rangers talk and people who are pretending to be colonists at Williamsburg, that it's more about this idea of principles and values. And just like wanting to seek comfort, I'll often go back and watch the same movies again when I'm feeling anxious, right? Go restart The Lord of the Rings or go reread the Foundation series. And for a political scientist, maybe the version of that when it comes to wanting to talk about some of these issues we're facing is looking back at the founding of our country. And so I am trying to kind of look at what are these ingredients that make us Americans, right? That led us to be going from colonists to our own country. And I think one of these key ingredients is liberty, okay? And this is going to be something that our founding fathers are going to have talked about, right? Coming out of the Enlightenment, being individuals who were looking at what was going on in Europe and seeing a lot of injustice. And so we see that they're going to talk about the fact that liberty is an expansive freedom, right? A protection from arbitrary government intervention and involvement in your life, right? The pursuit to find your own peace, okay? And so this key flavor of liberty, if we're thinking about it like a recipe or an ingredient, I think really lies in the discussion then and the discussion now about the ability to dissent, right? To dissent without penalty, with the ability to dissent and have these conversations and dialogues that are going to make American people better, the world better, and more broadly, what our founding fathers talk about as society or humankind. They're very rarely going to be using the word citizen when talking about liberties. And so when we look at the United States, it's going to be a system that was born from dissent, right? Our Declaration of Independence is one of the largest forms of dissent. It's treason, okay? They're going to be concerned about grievances they're going to have grievances against the King of England. But they're going to start their discussion about these grievances with first a primer on liberty, right? These protections for all humankind that everyone has and everyone is born with, right? Coming out of Greece, coming out of a lot of these framers' education in the Socratic method. And so when we look at what these grievances end up being, there's going to be 27 of them listed in the Declaration of Independence. The first one is going to be about immigration, right? Saying that the king is keeping immigrants from coming to the country and making America better. And that's one of the reasons why we want to have a breakup with this country, with this king. Okay, number 7. And then we're going to look at 18 and 19, right? Yes. Looking at how there's going to be due process, right? These being one of the things that when you have all of these great thinkers in the colonies coming together, they're going to be concerned about when people have to have government intervening in their lives, what are the protections and the way the government should act. So, there are, Thomas Paine is going to be one of the authors of the literal pamphlets that are going to be the target of the Stamp Act. Okay, that's going to be one of the big grievances in the coming of the Revolutionary War. And it's going to emphasize the limitless reach of the value of liberty and the need to act when any member of society, right, not any citizen of a country or member of a nation, any member of society is being oppressed. Okay, that's going to be intentional language. And this is a call to action that was heeded by our framers and our founders. The revolution was waged and won, a constitution was framed, but there still was dissent, right? And this dissent is what brought us the Bill of Rights. That's not going to have been included in the original Constitution. We're going to have some habeas corpus that you have to see your day in court, but nothing about having access to a lawyer or what a speedy trial is, or anything about what is cruel and unusual punishment. And so you have the minority party at the time, the Anti-Federalists, resisting the ratification of the Constitution and resisting through protest and writing more letters, right, the Anti-Federalist papers, about why the Constitution is not as broad or strong as it should be, because it doesn't have these protections for the people from a government that is too strong, tyrannical, and is oppressing individuals' ability to express themselves, to do political speech. And so they dissented, and we got the Bill of Rights, which is going to be one of the parts of our Constitution that most countries copy and borrow from us. They're not taking the Electoral College. This is what they're taking. And so our First Amendment is going to be talking about 6 different things, but the big one being about freedom of speech and assembly and the ability to protest and the press to do this and not just individuals. And that's going to be incredibly important for keeping the country together after one of our first tests, which is, can we get all these 13 colonies to come together? And we're going to see that as late as 1969, we have clarified language, right, interpreting the First Amendment as long as you are not calling for immediate violence with a date and a time and an RSVP, that this is going to be protected. And we extend our civil rights, our civil liberties, our constitutional provisions, including our 10 amendments, to immigrants. Okay? That is also going to be clarified through the Supreme Court. And so this is first going to be tested with an act that hasn't been discussed until recently, for the most part, which are these Alien and Sedition Acts. They're going to be used a bit during World War II, but not in quite the same way we talk about them now. This is going to be used in a place of time where there's going to be a proxy war with France, okay? Wanting to basically have a bribe or a payoff for helping us during the Revolutionary War, or they are going to start war with us and keep taking our naval ships. And so this is going to be where we see provisions that say that if there is war declared, the president can deport foreign aliens, right? People who are here on some sort of visa or process of the time. And then clarifying that the Alien Friends Act is going to be something that you can deport aliens from any nation, right? Not just from those at war. This was never actually something used by President Adams at this time, and it's going to be something that was meant to expire at the end of his term, which is about 2 years after these were introduced. And there was a lot of dissent about these acts. We're going to see Jefferson and Madison greatly resisting this at the time, doing it anonymously, but having letters that are going to come forward later between the two founders and framers, right? And then Jefferson in a letter to one of his students, I believe William and Mary, okay, talking about the need to preserve the freedom of the human mind and that freedom of the press and every spirit should be ready to devote itself to martyrdom for as long as we may think as we will and speak as we will, the condition of man will proceed to improve. Okay, talking about how there's going to be all of these great values and ideas that come from free exercise of opinion, right? That this oppression and suppression is going to be harmful to people at large. And although you don't see Adams using this to deport anyone, it absolutely led immigrants to flee the country, and people did not come here, right? That's one of the intended tactics in hearkening to this bill, right? Is the self-deportation and self-selection out of coming here from people. And so what we can see, I'm just going to leave you guys here with some quotes from other founders. This isn't just a Jefferson and Madison discussion. The people who are going to end up using these Alien and Sedition Acts to start one of the first real party systems following these anti-federalists and federalists, where the Federalists who passed these Alien and Seditions Act lost elections for 80 years. Okay, because the people stood up, said they were not okay with them. You have Kentucky and Virginia coming forward and signing their alternative forms of these laws and how they are unconstitutional and codifying our civil liberties before a constitution is going to have our Bill of Rights. But this is something that we're also going to see, these ideas of enlightenment, of liberty, coming from George Washington, right? The one person who Jefferson and Madison and Thomas Paine were afraid of becoming a monarch, right? Because we're seeing lots of targeting of immigrants, we even have our first president talking about how America should be an asylum to the virtuous and prosecuted part of mankind, to whatever nation they might belong. It doesn't talk about permanent status. It doesn't talk about naturalization. It talks about this broad sense of humanity. And you're going to hear this echoed by Benjamin Franklin, looking at how it's a sign of a good country and that America is living its liberties that he wrote very much about to its fullest when we have people wanting to move here, people wanting to study here, that is a sign of a healthy democracy. You're going to see this later being echoed by Frederick Douglass when he is discussing the use of the Alien and Sedition Act against the Chinese when it comes to the Chinese Exclusion Act and their inability to become citizens by our federal government. Talking about when there is conflict between humans and national rights, it is safe to side on humanity. Right? That when we have these conflicts where we might see there being policy or questions about whether it's about the person, the immigrant, or the process, that when it immediately happens, we should err on the side of let's check on the human first. right? We should make sure they have due process first before we deport them to a different state or to a different country where now we claim we can't get them back, right? Let's start with the human first, deal with the policy after. And then from a modern quote from an American historian, just wanting to point out how I think we can maybe use some language when we are trying to discuss with people who might be opposed to some of the ideas we're presenting here, is talking about the difference between immigration policy and immigrants themselves. Right? Immigration policy is something that I think people can feel more comfortable debating. Right? What is supposed to be the process of entry and how you're supposed to act when you're here. But hating immigrants as if they're lesser humans goes against a lot of these values that we just talked about in our foundations, in our beginning of our country, these people that we still talk about in Supreme Court cases today, and that dehumanizing people has nothing to do with what being an American is, right? It's not being a patriot. It's bringing in some of these bad parts that would not be something that our framers and our founders would be able to really recognize as American values. So that is where I'm going to leave it. And now we can hear from both sides.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me? Thanks to Chris and Courtney for their great presentations. I don't know quite how to frame my remarks today, but I thought I would begin by telling you a little bit about the definition of an international student, because that's where we are stuck right now. An international student is not an immigrant, just a student. And I can speak to this, from my research, but as well as from my own lived experience, because I have been through some of these categories of visas, like the J2, which is the exchange visitor. That was the first visa that I had when I arrived in this country in 1994, and then the F1 international student visa, which I stayed with for a long time during my graduate school years at the City University of New York. So an international student is someone who is here for a very specific purpose to complete a course of study, usually vetted before the visa is given. Vetted in the sense of having to show financial documents that they can support themselves. They are not allowed to work in the US freely. They have some limited ability to work on campus for a certain number of hours. They can also be involved in practical training, usually not lasting more than a year. In CUNY Graduate Center where I studied, I had a large cohort of international students. Many of them, like my friend Changwan, who's from South Korea, went back to Seoul and is a dean now at Kanghi University. So it's not assured that those who are coming to study here will continue to stay. Some of them, like myself, went on to continue to live here and pass through the various processes of permanent residency and eventually naturalization. Usually an international student is here for a limited amount of time, but during that time, they provide immense benefits to the communities that they belong to. So according to NAFSA, which is the Association of International Educators, and this is from their website, they tell us that there are like 1.1 million international students at US colleges and universities, contributed about $43.8 billion to the US economy in 23-24, and supported more than 378,000 jobs. So this is the economic impact. And I don't think this is the greatest impact. I think it is the cultural give and take which happens when international students come to a community. That is the biggest contribution. So at University of Wisconsin-Stout, in our website for the International Students Office, it says that we are Stout proud to have more than 300 degree-seeking exchange international students representing 40 plus nationalities per year as part of the diverse campus community. So in a town like Menominee, to have representation from 40 countries is pretty remarkable in terms of what it is, giving back. So a lot of students, in composition classes will tell me that I grew up in a very rural area and I really didn't have any exposure to diversity. So this is the first experience of diversity, and having such a rich experience, being able to interact with all these traditions and cultures, religions, nationalities is incredible. It's part of the Stout experience that students are getting. I would also be naive not to point out that international students are financially very remunerative for the universities in the US. And that is because no matter how long they stay, they are never going to pay in-state tuition. They will always pay out-of-state international tuition, which is considerably more. So they bring in more revenues to the universities that they attend. What we're seeing now in terms of recent attacks on international students is not something that can be isolated to only this moment. There has been pretty much a continuing trend in this, and I would locate it to 9/11. Probably because those were kind of formative years for me, because I was in New York at the time when it happened in 2001, and it really had an impact on campus climate. Because immediately there was the sense that out of the 19 hijackers, some of them were international students. And it was publicized as that. It turns out the truth is that there was only one student, one person among the suicide bombers and hijackers who had an international student visa. So the other 18 were in the US on business visas, tourist visas, etc. But it created a permanent kind of bad image for international students. And it quickly launched the SEVIS program, which is the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, which is really a way of surveillance. I remember when all this happened, one of the first things that the International Students Office told us is, be sure to carry your passport with you at all times in the New York subway system, which is just something kind of scary to do, because if you lose my Indian passport at that time, it would be very hard to get it back. But that is the kind of surveillance that all international students were subjected to. And that's not all. Soon after that, there was the creation of the Muslim registry. Students who belonged to Muslim countries had to go and declare themselves and register themselves. And that created, opportunities for deportation. So I'm just trying to locate this as a continuum from 9/11 onwards. But this surveillance, it's still an ongoing feature. But keep in mind that international students have to be very, very careful in all their actions. They always have to be maintaining a certain number of credits. They cannot, just take the semester off, because it will immediately put their visa status in jeopardy. They also have to, show their financial assets. And as I said, they're not allowed to work except in very limited capacity. Now, most international students may be here for a long period of time. Like I was an international student for, it's perhaps a little embarrassing to remember how many years I was a graduate student, writing my dissertation while all kinds of life events were happening. But in any case, during this time, life happens and you get involved in things that are happening around you, and you cannot always say, I'm just going to be in the Minare's library just writing my dissertation. Sometimes the events of the world pull you in. So this is, the early 2000s, late 1990s. Some of the things that were happening, this is before the Black Lives Matter movement, but it was not before police brutality was going on. So there was Amadou Diallo, who was, a black man who was shot by the NYPD, and it immediately led to a rally. Desis of course are South Asians, Desis for Diallo. And I remember going and joining that with a professor who also happened to be South Asian, and she was reading her poems in that public rally. It never occurred to me that I shouldn't be going because I'm on an international student visa and I could be picked up by the NYPD and then deported. It was, but now I'm sure it's not so easy to express yourself in these situations. But universities have traditionally been places where people have debated, have expressed their support for events around the world, whether it is the anti-apartheid protest movements or the Vietnam War. And international students have been part of that. They didn't stand separately just because they don't have all the rights of citizenship. So the question for us to discuss and pay attention to is, since international students are obeying the laws of the country that they are living in, they should also have the rights to free speech, to express themselves. They're writing dissertations or scholarly articles, so can they not write op-eds, or can they not speak out in public fora? So you think about that. And currently the way international students are being picked up are not because of any visa-related violations, or not only because they have been active in protests. It's for very many random reasons, like you might have a speeding ticket and that can flag something. So some of these things are being picked up by algorithms and AI, and it's basically predictive AI, which is putting things together and predicting that here is somebody who has the potential to create trouble, hence they should be put in jails or deported or whatever. All of this leads me to think about the Italian theorist Giorgio Agamben, who writes about the state of exception. The state of exception, of course, he discusses it in the context of the Nazi concentration camp, but it is applicable to a wide variety of other contexts, and it is really a condition of democracy where the normal democratic rights are in suspension and everything is dependent on the sovereign. And I think we are kind of moving into that terrain. And I also want to end by saying that this is not unique to the United States. We have in India the infamous UAPA Act, which is called the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. And under Modi, who is the right-wing Hindu Prime Minister, a lot of students have been arrested and have been in prison because of protesting laws like the Citizenship Amendment Act, which gives certain favors to Hindus as opposed to Muslims. And there are students who are languishing in jails for the last 4 years. They have been accused of fomenting riots when really all they did was protesting, and they haven't been released on bail, and they haven't been given a fair trial. So these are the two places that I'm very familiar with, and I can compare them and see what's going on. But it is, for me, this is not isolated to the United States at this moment. So I will stop here and let our students speak.
Hello, everyone. I wrote some stuff down, so if I'm looking down, it's not my phone. But I'll try to not make awkward eye contact with anyone. So, as many of you guys know, I am a Stout student here. My time as a Stout student has come with many different challenges and opportunities. I've been able to call myself a student employee as well as a student leader with multiple titles to my name. However, before all of those, I'm a student. I have a class with Dr. Avigdor Edminster called Graphic Ethnography. I know that's not the whole title, but it's a really cool class. In class yesterday, we were talking about the freedom of education and knowledge. And a particular part that I held on to was the separation of education that regurgitates the same knowledge and the education that aims to learn. And I thought that was very, very insightful. Sorry, I'm trying not to get emotional. I think this type of education that focuses on supporting students actively wanting to learn and bringing critical thought is something that we should all be instilling in our institutions. Not an institution that regurgitates the same schedule and the same knowledge that is limited. I think that is in itself advocating for not only our students, but also our educators, our teachers, our professors, who have so much knowledge to bring to the table. And by almost limiting and putting lenses on core concepts that we need to be the best kind of people that we can be, the most knowledgeable type of people that we can be, is extremely powerful in itself. As a Stout student coming in my freshman year, I was a person of color, a student of color, and I came into a space where they told me I had to navigate white spaces. This was something all students of color had to kind of put forth when entering onto this campus. Campuses all around Wisconsin would probably, I guess, agree with this. I don't want to make too many generalized comments. But when I came into leadership roles at Stout, my first leadership role was being the president of Black Student Union. And we brought that message into our own organization. That was something I changed immediately. I think if we have students here who are willing to learn and are willing to be as powerful as they can be in any shape or form, whether they were born here, whether they weren't, whether we have different skin tones, whether we don't, they all have the same access to education, the same limits to education as everyone else does. I think I'm kind of going off script here, so I apologize, but we as people have the ability to advocate for each other. We as students have the ability to advocate for each other as well. And when I changed the curriculum of Black Student Union, that was me advocating for the students who have been getting this regurgitated knowledge over and over and over again to fit into a lens. And that's something that I saw and I changed. That's something other people need to see and change as well. And that comes with having the freedom of knowledge, having the freedom of unlimited education, the learning and the teachings that we should be getting in school. That comes with sharing thoughts, critical thoughts, good dialogue, being able to have one-on-one conversations, debating each other in an academic sense. Not arguments. Well, you can argue, but I'm saying critical thoughts, good thoughts. We're trying to educate each other not trying to put each other down. I think that message in itself is so powerful. And it brings me joy to see that I have educators and students of my own who have that same thought, who spread that same message, who want to be able to advocate and inspire and support their students in the best way possible. When Chris, or the other Chris, I'm also Chris, was able to email me and Sophia about this panel, I mean, even before this panel, me and Sophia were talking and I was kind of getting a little scared. Because right now it is scary. It is a scary time for students. It's a scary time for educators. It's a scary time for everyone. But advocating for each other is the one way that we can make action. That's one way. Like being able to educate each other, being able to share the feelings and emotions that we so heavily rely on right now. That's powerful. And that is the things that you should be sharing with each other. I'm going to stop there because I got my round of applause. But I think we are all empathetic of each other. We share so many feelings and so many emotions in this one room. So I think what everyone should do when we're done here, and at Hyman Hollow, if you guys didn't know, we're going there after. But I think you guys should go out and share your knowledge. Like, unapologetically. Share your knowledge. Share your feelings and your thoughts. In a good way. But have good dialogue. Have good conversations with people. Because that's where it starts. There's education, then there's the sharing of it. And from there is action. That's how movements start. It's with the single person with single thoughts and feelings who inspire others. And I believe everyone in this room, I believe everyone on this campus has that ability to do so. But it just starts with one person. So I'll end it.
Little advice for everyone in the room: never follow Chris after she speaks, because she will make everyone in the room rethink everything. So, yeah, I'm not really sure where I wanted to go with this. I think when me and Chris were speaking about this earlier, very easy, simple dynamic between us. She wrote down her thoughts, and I'm just going to word vomit in front of you. I think the perspective that I wanted to give a little bit is my perspective as Director of Legislative Affairs, directly having a role in the representation that the student voters have on this campus. Their ability to vote, their ability to find knowledge about voting, and not only voting, but along with that role is I am a civic engagement lead for the Involvement Center. So bringing community and students together and helping students find their civic pathways and becoming better citizens. Because being a citizen is about so many different things, and I think we've all learned so many different things just from each panelist up here on what being a citizen means to all of us. So for a little bit of perspective on our campus, we are statistically one of the lowest voting outreaches or outputs in the United States, and we are the lowest out of all 13 in the universities. I will say, after 3 long years of a bunch of people who love the idea of civic engagement and really want to be stakeholders in this game, we're no longer the worst in the country, I will say, and we are getting our students out to vote. But for a little bit of perspective on that is, I will say our student demographics who are willing and wanting to vote is very low. And then I will say that our student demographics who are willing and wanting to participate in the community that is Menominee, that is Wisconsin, that is the United States is very low. And I do not blame students for that, not one bit. If I wasn't in this major, I think I would be completely checked out of everything that's going on in the United States right now. And I know when students see my face at the bottom of Price Commons when they go up to lunch and dinner, they're like, oh God, this girl wants me to vote so bad. And it is true, I really do. And I'm not even a Wisconsin resident, I'm from Minnesota. And coming to Wisconsin has been such an eye-opener in so many ways than one. When I turned 18, I registered to vote by checking a box on a paper when I went to go get my new license when I turned 18. Here, if a student wants to register to vote, you have so many loops you have to jump through, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. And so, on a legislative perspective of someone, a group of people, student government, who has to advocate for students on such a large platform, which is at the state capitol, it is really hard to gauge those stakeholders on what happens here on our campuses. Directly, I would say, Madison, the Capitol in Madison, the school in Madison, puts such a large shadow on what all of our universities do and what all of our communities look like. The amount of support that students have, no matter the race demographics that they have on these campuses. And then you see the academic demonization on such a large platform in Madison, in different places, and it can kind of be scary as a student. My biggest thing, and I think Chris's biggest thing as a student leader, and I think a lot of student leaders in this room, is meeting students where they're at, no matter who the student is. I was a horrible student my freshman year. I didn't go to class. I can look at these two professors down there and they could probably say that I did not go to class. I didn't turn my assignments and I didn't want to be here, but that was because I didn't feel the community, what happens when you get civically engaged in a community, what happens when you find your spark, and that can be almost anything. And being in a place with the amount of knowledge that is poured out and having that ability to, I'm from Minnesota, I'm from a small town, but there's enough people that look like me to make it feel like I can make a difference. But when I come here in the year 2022, 2023, there was 70-something Black students on our campus. You could fit us on this side of the room. And then if you want to look at Eau Claire, they had 3 less than us. And they have a whole lot more students than us. And then if you want to look at River Falls, we're right on par. So I think being a student of color, being a low-income student, and seeing some of these services and programs, and I think some of the things that Chris is talking about, having that outlet to go and share your ideas, get feedback, it's kind of being almost limited, and not limited necessarily on our campus, but I think students are afraid of what that might look like if it becomes limited. In classes where our Buddhism class, it is over now, I feel incorrect every time I speak. I feel like I maybe am saying the wrong things. But having that ability to maybe feel like I was saying the wrong things gives me so much education and knowledge right back when I get it. So I would say that I'm rambling a little bit and riding off of Chris's wave. So with that, I will end it there and look over to my professors on the other end. Thank you, everyone.
I think, if I check time, we do have some time for questions, if we'd like to do that. I'll open it up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone at all? Oh, I see one.
I'm just so glad to be able to be here as a community member, and I want to know how to reach out to Stout students, you know, so that you can feel part of our community.
Before we began this evening, a lady and I were talking, in fact, talking with the group here, and there was a comment made about students feeling, I don't know what quite, I don't want to use the word unsafe, but maybe not as welcome by the community members, of which I am, and a lot of us here this evening are. And I was wondering if you could talk to that a little bit more, because personally, I feel an engagement. I go to the Raw Deal a lot for coffee. And I meet a lot of students. And I will approach students one-on-one and just, start a conversation going, just to get to know students a little bit. And so I personally don't feel that way. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how valid that feeling is between the students and, say, we adults in the community.
Well, that's a great question. And I guess I can't necessarily speak for every student when I talk about the engagement within our community. And I sit in a really special position with the job that I have in our involvement center is doing direct community stuff. So within the past semester, we have done direct a Christmas card to someone in the elderly home, and we had over 100 cards that we sent directly to, I think it was the one at the edge of town by the community gardens over there. So I would say I think COVID. I don't want to blame things on COVID anymore, but I think COVID in my generation and community outreach, it kind of stalled. Just this year on our campus, we're finally seeing students wanting to be engaged. We've had, for the first time ever, 200 students consistently showing up to bingos. And over a year ago, you couldn't even get a student to come out of their dorm for lunch or dinner or to go to class. I did that once. But so I think we're progressing, and I think we're getting there. And I think you have to live, and maybe this is just me, I could be just saying this, I think you have to live a summer in Menominee. I think you have to be here in the summer and see what this place is actually like and see the community that it holds, and go to events the first couple weeks of school, like our Meet Menominee event that is within the first week of school. The more students that go to that, they see the community that is here in Menominee. They see what the community has to offer, the community events. I can celebrate this today. Actually, last night at 1 in.the morning, I decided to sign myself up for a community garden spot. So I will be community gardening with anybody in here who's community. So it takes the time to get there, and I had the ability to see what Menominee was like in the summer. And a lot of students get to have that ability after their junior or senior years. But the freshmen who are coming out of high school right now, I cannot necessarily give you rationalize to you how strange it was to go to high school during COVID, to be a kid during COVID, to grow up during COVID. So we're getting there, and it has nothing to do with the community. It has everything to do with going back to the way things were before we had a global pandemic, if we can even get there. But I think it's happening, and we're doing a really good start of this on our campus.
I think I'll just add a little bit on there. As freshmen, I can attest I haven't spent a summer in Menominee yet. We're changing that this year. But, thank you, Igmar. I think coming in as a freshman and a sophomore into college, you're somewhat isolated in a town like Menominee. I don't have a car, so I'm already confined to wherever my feet can take me, in a sense. And yes, but yes, you do drive. But, there isn't a lot of kind of knowledge about what the community holds for students that is super fun. Like the farmer's market. Sophia loves, she has taken me to the farmer's market. I will say that, that is a fact. But that wouldn't come from anything that I would find here on campus. That's how I was engaged from Sophia through her experience living here over the summer. So fun things around Menominee is, and the rest of what Menominee has to offer, that the community has to offer, I just don't think it's very well known within the student population without other people like having word of mouth, basically. Like Sophia will always talk about the farmer's market. Everyone in involvement will always talk about the farmer's market and how much they love it. And from there, they bring other people, but there's not other events that like we hear from and spread around that we know like a plethora of. Which I think we can fix. I'd love to go to more community events, particularly ones I can walk to, but that could be also something that sometimes people just don't know. And we have that problem working in involvement of people not knowing like when certain events are, where they are. So it's not like a new problem or anything like that. But if you ever want to share with me any fun events around Menominee, please do.
There's a Menominee Minute that tells you things that are going on in Menominee, and we just love to have you come to those events. It's on the internet.
So kind of coming from like an upperclassman perspective, I'm a senior of criminal justice, and I think now more than ever, when you're leaving college, it's kind of really up in your face, you know, and there's a lot of wrong things happening, and kind of going into like, well, potentially government positions within criminal justice. How do we speak out against this without, you know, hurting our reputation and hurting our positions that we're in, you know what I'm saying? Because it can be really difficult when you're kind of locked into that government job. So kind of like anybody up on the panel, what do you kind of think about that?
I think so much of it, when it comes to law enforcement as well, because you're in criminal justice, comes to having those conversations, right? Classic beat cops from yesteryear. And as it goes for working within the organization, it's probably going to be similar to Chris and Sophia's route, where you find leadership roles in there and you change the culture from roles within there, right? That we have to be able to call each other out, and that's not going to lead to people being put on bad assignments. Or maybe the law enforcement officers can step in and connecting the community to students and being a moderator in that. But I think it can simply start with talking to people you're working with, right? Sending a text to your other colleague, your other professor friend about what's going on, and then you need to want to talk to other people.
Hello. Okay. I think right now I have me and Chris especially have a lot to talk about this with just kind of the state of Wisconsin politics recently. I don't know if any of you know, but probably most of you know this. The JFC is meeting around Wisconsin during their budget hearings. And right now a really big item on the budget is the UW systems budget. $850 million, and my specific job is to advocate for it and go to the Capitol and talk about students and yada yada yada. And specifically, I think that is me doing that. I think that there should be nothing wrong with that because it completely is 100% student focused and it highlights what the student needs are. And along with that, it highlights faculty and staff. But there might be a differing opinion once I get to the Capitol. So I have to rephrase what I'm doing to make it more palatable to people who might not like it. So specifically something that we had to do for students to be able to sign a letter or send a letter to the representative, something that all students should know how to do already, but they kind of gatekeep that information up there in the Capitol. We met students where they were and tabled in front of their face with a QR code. And all you gotta do is read it, put your stuff in, and then you can walk away from me and pretend like you did. And to do that, I had to get school administrative approval. I had to go through my advisor. But I'm just doing my civic duty. There's nothing explicit behind me doing my civic duty, and it's actually a protected state statute, 36095, if you want to get technical. So I think the one thing that I learned going to the Capitol is that you are not alone and you will never be alone. And there's more than likely 10 other people in the room who are just like you, who are change makers, who want to make that change and don't know how. And then echoing off of what Chris said in the beginning, that was really beautiful, was having that stage to talk about it. So once a month, we meet with all of the other student representatives on all 13 campuses, and I am a loud person, and I say things sometimes that get me in trouble sometimes, and who cares? But after I say that, a domino effect, a domino effect, a domino effect, a domino effect, and then finally change happens. It might take some pulling at teeth, it might take some saying some things that might ruffle some feathers, but feathers can get, combed down a little bit. And that's kind of my philosophy, so to completely understand, and why do I have a philosophy? I'm like 22 years old, I can't have one of those yet, but hey, wonderful. Basically, kind of what I'm saying here is you are never going to be the one person in the room who has the one thought that will change everything. You just have to be, maybe, by chance, the person who starts that fire that spreads amongst other people. Thank you.
I just wanted to offer some advice. I think, first of all, I don't go here. I go to Eau Claire. Hey, I'm one of the 73, I think. I think one of the big things is solidarity, and I don't think that we spend enough time as students on other campuses. I think a lot of the times issues feel central and personal to our own campuses. So I'm really excited that I got to come here today because we're having the same conversations, and it might be more impactful to have them together. So I would encourage people to take the trip to Eau Claire, if you can drive. It's a long walk. Or driving down to Madison and seeing what's going on. I also think we would have such a big impact on what goes on with the UW system if we showed up together.
Imagine being on a vacation.
Yeah, and so I implore you all to get together. I say you all because I'm also graduating, so I'll be around, but yeah, just spend time with each other and come hang out with the BSU at Eau Claire. We're cool. There's only a few of us, but we're cool.
My name is Bonnie Trimble. I've been in this town since 1968. I actually got 2 degrees in here, and only I came in as an old person, and so, it was a little hard to get started. But today, what I really wanted to talk about, and again, I wanted to thank you in specific about your visa information, is my son Casey went to Turkey as a senior in high school. It took him, and he went with the Rotary Rotary Exchange, And it took him 2 months longer to get a visa to Turkey than all the rest of the Rotary kids in Wisconsin. And before he left, we were told, and this is why something that I think everybody needs to understand is the visa issue isn't just Wisconsin and the United States, it's everywhere. But he was told day one that when he got over there, he was not to do anything with drugs, not to get involved with any groups. If there were any groups at all, he was to run the other direction. If anything like that happened, he would definitely be deported, and they could deport him for any reason at all. And if he got into drugs or something else where they might arrest him, we might never see him again, because they would go, he'd be imprisoned, and maybe they would never have a lawyer. So it isn't just here. But my advice, in all honesty, would be go together in groups, and if you are international or whatever, make sure you carry all your information with you, and make sure you let everybody know where you're going. It's a new world that we live in right now, and I don't like it. I'm not happy with it. I do want to say one last thing is thank you all for the information you gave us tonight. It was so helpful. And as far as students are concerned, there is a ton of things that we do. We have music at the library every Thursday that is free. And we have all kinds of different groups of people that come in and actually sing and play. They're at where the farmers market is. They have a little place there. We have music every Tuesday, all summer long too. And they have pie, and they have ice cream and popcorn and all kinds of really cool things. So please find a way to join us, all right?
Freeman, we do have 2 minutes, so if we want to do one more question, maybe?
There you go.
I was wondering about there's realistic fear, obviously, for student visa holders. It's a very serious issue. And there is self-censorship that's going on because of that. I was just wondering what short-term, long-term people can do to make less effect. You're talking about people's research, about the ongoing community interaction, safety issues. I'm just wondering if anybody's idea what can be done to mitigate some of the worst of this damage from this fear.
I would like to answer that. I think the first thing is to stop self-censoring. Like, a lot of immigrants, they want to forget, their visa days. As soon as they get their permanent residencies, they think, the doors to immigration should be shut, and it's a fear perhaps of more people coming and taking the little they have, or whatever it is. But I really think one should not forget some of the hardships that you go through as an international student, and try to speak up for those who don't have any rights, so to speak, especially now. And to have forums like this where there is an opportunity to explain and to get out of our own fear and anxiety. So it's not easy to write or speak about these topics, but I try even in writing poems. I had a poem which I wanted to read, but I forgot about it because I was so nervous. But maybe I'll read a part of it or something, but we're out of time, so I will not do that. I will not suggest. But it is about remembering and I cannot speak to international students right now. Okay, I'll go fast. Maybe not. Okay, this one, I wrote this in 2018 when there was a crisis in the southern border, and it's called At the Border. A short, pudgy man with ice gray eyes once looked at my papers on the Ontario-New York border and said, "You are missing one signature from the international office." I'm not sure if you're a PhD candidate or an illegal alien flipping burgers at McDonald's. The words sting, even after a decade. Undeserved guilt, raw fear of a life of many years rudely unraveling. A life spun in libraries, rides on the uptown train to the Bronx, our little apartment of ragged chairs, bookshelves bent with secondhand books from the Strand, floors strewn with essays of students who were single moms, juggling babies and exams between flipping burgers. A lifetime later, now with a new passport, my palms dampen and throat dries at the border. I did not flee a war to come to this land, with a toddler at my hip and my life in a backpack. Yet I know that if this blue booklet with the watermark of bald eagle is lost, this face and accent will not shield me. And if born in another country, ruled by cartels instead of unions, I could be that woman at the border, hearing the last wail of a vanishing son, grief turning me to weeping stone like Niobe, or like Draupadi with her matted hair, mourning the death of all her children in battle, or like Setha, haunted by the ghost of beloved, death more bearable than children sundered by slavery. Wow.
Well, there you have it. Here we come as witnesses to testify for the truth of the times in beautiful ways. We all have different stories to tell, but are we so happy that we're all here? And isn't that just so nice? We're so lucky. And every once in a while you gotta make pause to realize, that we are so lucky to have each other in times such as these. So we invite you guys to come to a reception at 222 Main Street. It's Hive and Hollow Flower Company. And Tim Sheedle and the Menard Center has provided a magnificent banquet for us to celebrate our togetherness and make sure that we can enjoy the evening and take some delicious flavors along with the flavors of our speakers tonight, but some flavors of this event to take with us and some savor. So we'll see you for our after event, okay? Thank you all for coming.